Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Perspective. This is episode 4. I'm delighted to be joined by Paddy again. Paddy, how are you?
Oh, terrible! Thanks. I can't wait to watch the World Super League. Um, yeah, I mean, we got nothing to talk about. Yeah, at the, at, obviously I'm disgusted in the same way as everybody else is,
Hmm.
but I'm also aware of this being the best opportunity that football lovers have, and the perspective is for football lovers, that football lovers have the world over to shape the destiny of the game.
Yeah. Well, I'll before we kick on,
Yeah.
for our viewers, that we just want to tell you that the main topic is, of course, the European Super League,
Mm.
and it's basically consisting of 12 clubs, 6 from the Premier League. The owners have brandished out this new plan to implement this new European football competition, which basically undermines the power of UEFA and the Champions League.
Yeah.
It's a developing story which is, going to be changing throughout the day. As far as we know, as it stands so far, all the big 6 clubs in, England have omitted themselves from the ECA, which means that I don't know what that means really, Paddy. I think it
Well,
basically
it means that they're breaking away from
from
the
UEFA and stuff.
establishment,
Yeah,
at
yeah.
least on a short-term basis. They're tearing up any pretense at brotherhood of football,
Mm.
and they're setting up something like the NFL. It's a form of cultural expropriation.
There's definitely a form of Americanization
Yeah.
involved in
Mm,
all of it.
mm,
Especially, I mean, it even goes down to the influence of JP Morgan, which is a massive American bank.
yeah.
But yeah, let's actually get into what we think of it. Paddy, I'm going to start with you because
Mm,
we're both on here because I think it's almost like a coping mechanism for
mm.
stories like this.
Yes, it
We always
is.
want to speak about stories which affect everybody in football. So when you actually first heard the news break, what were your initial thoughts?
Well, at last, they've come out in the open. They've been honest. Um, I mean, a lot of people. I've been watching the sort of rolling sports news on television, and the rolling news, and a succession of supposed experts have come on saying that they're shocked and all that. Well, I was a football correspondent for newspapers for 40 years, starting in 1976. And I can promise you that this idea was a sort of constant soundtrack to the way European football was viewed. It was there in the background. It was music, and every now and again, particularly in the recent decades, when the money in football has been greater, the Champions League has expanded. Then the frequency of the wielding of these threats, the brandishing, as you called it, um, has become more, and each time a little more is given, so that the ECA, which was always dominated by these so supposedly big clubs, although they aren't big at all, um, it has become total, so that the two organizations running the tournaments, the UEFA and ECA, are both dominated by these until now. And that's why I think I talked before about an opportunity, because they're coming out in the open and rebelling, saying that they're going to leave. Certainly leave midweek football, as if they can pick and choose the days on
Yeah,
which they take part in football. I mean,
graceful. Yeah.
uh, it's a joke. You don't know whether to be insulted or to laugh, but
Mm.
um, it it um, it has. I think there could be benefits in that they finally come together. I mean, Omar, obviously I'm a lot older than you. I'm half a century older than you, and
Mm.
you said to me before we met this morning, this is the biggest moment as a football lover, this is the biggest moment I've ever encountered. I said, trust me, I'd say the same. And I've
Yeah.
done 50 years more than you.
Yeah.
It is massive, but it's as well as as a sense of massive betrayal. There's also, for me, a sense of absolute opportunity, because if the audience, if the consumers, and I know fans don't like being called consumers, but that's how they're viewed.
Mm.
If the consumers of football, the lovers of football, don't take action now, they're finished.
Yeah.
We are finished. We are simply cannon fodder. And from now on, we won't be able to complain about it anymore. Because,
Yeah.
what people talk about the ownerships of Liverpool and Manchester United as if they were substantial things. They're not. The owners of Liverpool, the owners of Manchester United, the owners of Inter, the owners of Milan, they're shells.
Mm.
They have no power at
No.
all. You have power.
Mm.
I have power
Mm.
because we pay for it.
Yeah.
And I mentioned to you again before we came on air the case of Ratner's. Now, young people won't know what Ratner's was, but Ratner's was the biggest high street jewelers. And there was a Ratner's on every high street in the country. It was an immensely popular business. And one day, Gerald Ratner, the boss of the company, was talking at, I think, a business conference or something like that. And he said, look, we sell crap. That's why it's cheap. It's junk.
Mm.
But it's popular and people
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it. But the disparaging his own product, which is what these guys are saying,
Yeah.
completely destroyed the product, not because of directly because of Ratner's speech, but because the customers withdrew their support for the products. They thought, well, if he says they're crap, they are. We'll go to another jeweler or do something else. So, and that company collapsed from being a massive company, collapsed in 3 months, 6 months, whatever it was. And the Glazer regime at Manchester United can collapse just as quickly if the reaction from the consumers is the same. The trouble is, you can't buy a different jewelry. You support the shirt that the Glazers make money from.
Yeah.
But it has to be done this time. The industrial action has to be taken by fans.
Yeah, I mean, touching upon the point about the influence of fans in our game, they are the life and soul of the sport, and it's easier said than done, I think, to say we have a say, and it is a massive opportunity. I think, don't get me wrong, to maybe get these sort of owners out of football clubs, but I think the opinions of football supporters vary depending in the regions we're brought up in. So, for example, supporters in the United Kingdom, I think they understand the localization of football in terms of what it means between, the relationship between a community and a football club itself. Whereas fans and supporters on a global scale, they don't have the same relationship with a football club as you would if you lived around the corner from a football club or understood the history of a football club, for example.
Right. Yeah.
And I think the argument from the big six at the moment is that they are trying to appeal to fans on a global scale in creating this Super League because they think this is what fans want. This is what everybody wants. But they're completely silencing, the fans that do matter to the football club, who live and breathe the football club, who pay, who work their socks off to pay for a season ticket,
who make the noise,
in the
stadium that makes the football club exciting all over the world. Now, the fan in Tokyo, now it's not his or her fault that he can't go to Old Trafford or Anfield every week. We can't go to Tokyo every week. But it is the fact that the local element of football, and when you say local, Manchester United is a national club, so is Juventus, so is Real Madrid, so is Barcelona. It's a multinational club, but you cannot ignore that local element. And that applies to Real Madrid and Barcelona's fans as much as anybody else. A Barcelona fan, the game against Real Madrid matters much more than even losing in the last minute to Liverpool. It matters much more how they stand vis-a-vis Real Madrid. And I think, was it Gary Neville or somebody said, No, it was Tony Evans, the journalist, who tweeted. I mean, that when I heard about this, the first thing I thought, he's a Liverpool supporter. The first
Mm,
thing I thought of was Everton,
mm,
because that's what matters most:
yeah,
the
yeah,
relationship between Liverpool and Everton. And that's not to say that Liverpool don't want to worry about Champions League opponents. Of course they do. They've got great Champions League history. But they what Tony Evans was saying was that he believes that Everton should be allowed to aspire to a great Champions League history themselves.
yeah, yeah. And I think, I'm pretty sure, well, derbies like the Merseyside derby, they are, with this news, they are in massive, massive jeopardy of, potentially not happening. I think it
Well,
was
they might
rule.
be played by reserve teams.
Yeah, I
If
think
you've
it
got a
was.
big Champions League game on,
I think it
or
was.
sorry, World League or whatever it
I
is.
think it was Rule L9 in the Premier League states that the Premier League must give approval
Mm,
if other clubs wanted to compete in other competitions
mhm,
outside of the Premier League on a
mhm,
domestic basis.
mhm,
But the Premier League have come out and said
mhm.
they came out with a statement yesterday saying they completely condone the new European Super League. Actually, would expect them to, but the problem is with that is that because they're
They
condoning
don't
it,
condone it, you mean?
they don't condone it. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
And the problem with that though is the super clubs,
Mm,
because the Premier League aren't agreeing to this new
mm, mm,
competition.
mm.
The super leagues, the super clubs, then, or the big clubs involved in the Super League, they can now break away if they don't agree from the Premier League
Mm,
itself and
mm,
not compete in it at
yeah.
a domestic level, which
Mm,
then puts into jeopardy, football as we know it today.
mm,
I
mm.
mean, Paddy, imagine a world where the likes of Chelsea, Manchester City, Manchester United aren't competing with Leicester, West Ham, Everton,
Yeah,
Southampton. I
yeah.
mean, you just can't imagine it, can you?
No, no, of course you can't imagine it, and it it, it is a project fear. I mean, Gary Lineker tweeted that, and I'm paraphrasing, that this greedy plan will. I have a suspicion that it's going to collapse on its fat and greedy arse or something like that, and I agree with that. I think, I think the non-consummation of this thing is part of the plan. It's a power game to get what they want within the a single a unitary footballing administration. I think that that is what they want, but they want to redesign it so that it doesn't involve, in a sense, that it doesn't involve hardly any promotion or relegation,
Mm,
and that's what I mean by cultural expropriation. They're
mm,
trying to hijack
yeah,
the the rules by which we play football in every country in Europe, and in fact, pretty well every country in the world.
yeah. And I think this. We were talking about this before we came on there. I think
Mm,
this. I think the damage is already done now, Paddy. To be honest with you, I don't
mm,
think
mm.
I can't see, a way, the clubs and the owners themselves can, with the big six, can actually move on from this
No,
and actually function in the same way they were doing, because it's just completely broken relationships between the supporter and the owner.
yeah. I mean,
And
how on earth can Spurs fan? I mean, Spurs fan. Let's take Spurs for a brief example, and I won't interrupt you for long
yeah, go on.
because you are speaking. But how the Spurs fans, as soon as they become develop a real respect for Daniel Levy for having supervised the building of arguably the best stadium in the world, if not the
Mm,
biggest, but but arguably the best stadium in the world, and briefly having a team that looked as if it could compete at home and abroad on equal terms with anybody. Uh, no sooner has that happened than he and Joe Lewis, the owner, have thrown away any modicum of trust. I doubt if there's a single Spurs fan in the world who now trusts Levy and Lewis as far as he or she could throw them.
mm. Hmm.
And the same, I mean, the Glazers obviously start from a much lower base. I don't think anybody had an iota of respect for them in the first place, but that has now gone. And personally, I'm not a Man United fan, and in a sense, I'm not that bothered as a Man United fan would be about what the Glazers have done to the club.
Hmm.
When I hear Joel Glazer lecturing me,
Oh,
lecturing me and you and football fans
I felt
all over the
sick. I
world
felt
about
sick,
what they
genuinely.
want.
I know.
I could have thrown up.
Oh, I genuinely felt, sickened, to be associated. I mean,
I don't
it's
ever
just,
want to hear from that man again. I don't want to see his face.
I think it's worse as well, from the perspectives of Liverpool and Manchester United, because they've a lot of the history behind these two most fantastic clubs has developed around the theories around socialism and being together all as one. That I mean,
Yes,
the
football was based on a form of socialism.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
even American sports is based on an element of that, perhaps an exaggerated element of it.
yeah,
But yes, it's a form of token socialism. It's and I think probably all of this process began when English football seeded that, when the principle of sharing gates
mm,
was of attendance money was changed in the 1970s, I think it was, or
yeah,
early 80s.
yeah.
So that and since then it's just been a drip, 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 and every time it becomes more Wall Street and less, national game.
Yeah, yeah. I think as well, uh, yeah, going back to my point about
Mm,
the ownership regime, I think there's been a lot of negativity around the ownership about, in particular, Manchester United Football Club. But I'm just using them as an example because
mm,
I'm well educated on this subject, and I think
yeah,
um, that I think the damage is completely done now. I don't see a way back. I think that there needs to be. Gary Level alluded to it yesterday. There needs to be a form of like a regulatory body that actually controls um, ownership regimes in this country and gives
yes,
fans, some
yes,
sort of authority behind the ownership of these football clubs, similar to what we see in Germany with
yes,
Bayern
exactly,
Munich
exactly.
and
I
Borussia
mean, it
Dortmund.
would, to use shorthand terms, if European football adopted simply lock, stock, and barrel German league rules, it would be a much better place. It would be an infinitely better place forever.
Yeah.
And so, to use shorthand, that's what needs to happen. Just one thing I would like to interject, that obviously our fellow perspective uh, um, members are we're happy. We would talk about this forever because we feel so strongly about it, but we do welcome your views, and we would like you
Mm,
to share them. But more important, even more important than us or you, we have and immediately after we finished having our distraught rant about this, um, we recorded an interview, Omar and I,
mm,
towards the end of last week with Sam Wallace. This was because today's program was supposed to be a Sam Wallace special to celebrate his election as Football Writer of Year and Breaker of Football Scoop of the Year in the Telegraph, which was Project Big Picture. Now, you may think that his views, which we recorded, have been overtaken, but they haven't. Sam's study of this subject and allied subjects led him to a very gloomy view of the future of football, and boy, was he proved right. So
mm.
please stay with us,
Yeah.
because at the end we will be playing virtually
All of
in
it.
its entirety,
Yeah.
Omar, aren't we?
Yeah.
The interview with Sam Wallace, and it is mind-blowingly
Yeah.
perceptive. Perspective. I nearly said perspective.
Perspective.
Sorry, I just thought we ought
No,
to
no, no. Yeah,
reassure our
yes,
members about that.
yeah. Definitely, you make sure you tune into Sam's after, because all of it is highly relevant to the recent topical events that have broken. I've got some more breaking news for you, Paddy, because this is just going to
Yeah,
go on as we speak throughout the
yeah,
day. So, according to Marca, which is the Spanish outlet
yeah, for
in
Real
Spain
Madrid
in Real
mainly.
Madrid, so they've said the Champions League and Europa Super League will continue as planned, and the clubs will have joined the Super League, will be able to continue competing this season with absolute normality. I've seen loads of supporter groups already, completely condemning the new plans, but I'm genuinely concerned, Paddy, for what football is becoming and where we're going to be maybe in the next 10 years or so, because if it's going the way it's going at the moment, I'm scared people are just going to fall out of love with the beautiful game. Completely.
That's unquestionably the danger.
Mm.
On the other hand, it could regenerate. I mean, this is always the hope that if there is a turning away from the big clubs, that it could help to regenerate the clubs who remain in the traditional pyramid and are willing to play football on the basic principles that it's been played for, a century or more. But at the moment, we just can't say. But all we can say is that there is an attack from outside on football, and the severity of the response to it, and I believe it should be as severe. We should use every single weapon at our command to defeat this, and to defeat it in as aggressive a way as possible. I expect appeasement. I dread appeasement. But if you ask me what I think will happen, I think there will be a compromise. It will be a disaster. I think a fight would be much better and much better for football.
So do you think maybe so what do you think is going to happen to the Big Six in general? Do you think that this will eventually go through?
I think they'll be appeased, and I think that their plan won't go through, but it's it is a nonsensical plan as well. Market forces have already proved that too many basically what it provides for two things: protection against relegation and more Champions League group games. Now, market forces have already proved twice that having more Champions League group games is not cost effective. The public turn away from it. Do you remember when there were 2 group stages every year in the Champions League? It was dropped, and it was dropped for a reason. And so they are basically going back to a plan which has already failed. So I don't think even they can possibly, unless they're even more stupid than they seem, I don't think even they can be expecting that the plan as they have announced it will be what football will end with. But any compromise towards it will be an absolute disaster.
I mean, it begs the question why nothing has been said yet by, managers and staff, because,
because I would think it's because they're under contract. They would be breaking the terms of their own contract, as indeed would players. If, let's say, who's Chelsea? Suppose Cesar Azpilicueta. He probably doesn't believe a word of what I'm putting into his mouth. But suppose he said, "I'm going to refuse to play against Real Madrid." Because I believe our fans, to a man or a woman, do not want this plan to take place, and both my club and the ones we are playing are signed up to it. He wouldn't get any wages. He wouldn't have a contract. He's 30. What is he? 32, and he'd be going to.
But Paddy,
he'd be out on his ear. So, and I think that they don't have the freedom to do that. I wish they would. I wish I wish the kind of powerful action that Marcus Rashford took could, everyone could get together and take that on behalf of the health of the industry in which they work. But I'm not holding my breath for it to happen. I'm sorry, Omar, I'm not.
I mean, but what would happen to what? I mean, let me rephrase my question. What must the players be thinking now then? Because I think UEFA put out a statement that said they would, ban the breakaway clubs and players from competing in the Champions League and the
Yeah, but
Europa
that's
League.
my understanding is that would be way down the league. I don't expect Euro 2020 to be disrupted. Obviously, it would be wonderful if it were,
Mm,
but in terms for the interests of the long term.
mm,
But no, I don't. I think that's a plan Z somewhere down the line. It's what they always do with these things is give the offenders a chance to get their story straight and to get the defense ready and
mm.
to outmaneuver any punishment that comes along. That's what I think will happen this time. They'll say, ooh, instead of saying the Champions League semi-finals next week will not take place, and PSG, who haven't signed up to it yet, but probably are ready to as soon as they fancy it.
Yeah.
I personally, the right thing to happen would be to say, no, stop it now.
Mm.
Then we talk. We come to the table under duress. Don't come to the table with you, the rebels, the ones who've changed the rules, being allowed to dictate the terms of negotiation.
Yeah.
But that's what's always happened in football. That's why
Yeah.
we're in the crap, because this has been going on for so long, because the people who know how football should be run and those who pay for its existence, i.e. us, don't use our power.
No.
So now is the time.
And I think it just shows as well that these owners, they don't care about a lot of their supporters. They don't care about a lot of their fans. They're all in it for money.
What on earth made you think that
I know.
The Glazer family could care less about any fan of Manchester United? Why should they? Why should they? They didn't grow up on the cobbled streets of Salford and walk across the swing bridge to stand on the Stretford end.
No.
John Henry, had he ever heard of Liverpool FC 10 years ago? I mean, the idea, Roman Abramovich, did he go to sleep in a Chelsea shirt with Chopper Harris on the back when he was a kid? No, of course, they don't care. I mean, it's laughable that they should even be able to posture, and that's why I object to Joel. I think it's Joel or Avram Glazer, saying we are doing this for the fans. Keep your nose out of it. This, you don't know what a fan is.
Well, I think the biggest indication that they don't care about the fans is the actual timing of all of this. I mean, in the midst of a pandemic,
a lot of people. I agree with you, Omar. A lot of people have been absolutely, going beyond football, have been absolutely outraged by the timing of it.
It's disgusting.
They would probably say that's why we're doing the timing, but it's. Yes, I agree with you. That part of it is disgusting. Everything about it is disgusting.
It's disgusting, yeah. And I mean, we've talked about like players coming out. Well, the one notable player that has just come out, that the first main profile is Ander Herrera, who plays for
Very
PSG.
good for him. Yeah.
He's come out and said, "I fell in love with football, of the fans, the dream of seeing the club I love to compete with, the biggest of them all. If this European Super League advances, those dreams are over. I believe in an improved Champions League, not the rich stealing what the people created, which is the most beautiful sport on the planet." I mean,
no, he's right.
Powerful.
I don't know what he means by an improved Champions League, but
well, they're talking about reforming it, aren't they?
Yeah, but my worry is that if the reforms are going in this direction, then I don't see how that can be an improvement. But Ander Herrera may know more about the state of the negotiations than I do. But actually, everyone keep watching, because when we play the Sam Wallace interview immediately after we finish talking, he will allude to the very subject that Omar has raised there.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to the other big topic of the day. I mean, it feels weird that this isn't even the biggest subject of the day, doesn't it? Tottenham.
Jose Mourinho gets the sack.
Yeah, Jose Mourinho. I mean, it's normally just huge.
It's one paragraph at the bottom of the page.
I mean, yeah. Well, Tottenham Hotspur confirmed that Jose Mourinho has left the club. But I thought, the timing of this was also carefully constructed, off the back of this incredible, massive story. And then suddenly I just don't see it anymore else than a deflation tactic from Daniel Levy to get
Yeah.
everybody else to talk about something else, and have Tottenham as like the forefront to try and maybe claim their positioning as this so-called Big Six club, despite not ever winning European trophy in God knows how long. But what were your initial reactions to the timing, first of all, and the actual sacking itself of Jose Mourinho?
Yeah, well, the timing, personally, my reaction was less dramatic because of the timing and what we've just spoken about. As far as the news is concerned, I'm pleased because I think it's a relief.
Yeah.
It was going nowhere. It was the best that could have happened was a quiet handshake in the summer. Why Levy brought it forward to, as you say, this suspiciously good day to bury bad news, if that's what it's considered. But yeah, I do feel a sense of relief. I think anybody who loves Tottenham Hotspur and the history and in particular the recent history, the Pochettino era, finds it. Again, I'm not a Spurs. I'm not particularly a fan of any of the big clubs, but Tottenham, that white shirt means something to old geezers like me who remember Bill Nicholson and so on. So there's something about Spurs and the football that we've been playing under Jose as, in the main, been unspurs. And so to that extent, it's a relief.
Yeah, I think from the calamity we saw in Europe with Spurs, that horrible loss to Dinamo Zagreb.
Yeah.
As I said, the downfall. I thought that was the beginning of the end for Mourinho. I mean, you could have sacked him after that performance. It was so dire, and I think the dressing room, the players in there, they have some very big characters in there. I mean, I haven't seen so much intensified speculation over Harry Kane's future as I have in his whole entire career. I remember at the early stages of his career, there was talk of him maybe wanting to leave to, pursue a career at Real Madrid. Yeah, and at Manchester United. And I think, this is Daniel Levy is an individual, as we can see from, the topical events in football today, that he is a man that has, a massive attribution towards attaining player assets. And I think Harry Kane was one of those figures in particular that, he could demand 150, 200 million pounds from. But the way this Spurs side was going, I know Harry Kane is a top class player, but if the team isn't doing as well, then obviously the value of your highly attributed player is going to go down more and more. So I think that all was influential. But interesting in his statement, I've got it up here. He said in it, on a personal level, I've enjoyed working with him and regret that things have not worked out as we both had envisaged. So, the wording of it, he doesn't then go into the detail as to why he left or the decision he made as to why he decided, to get rid of him. So I think, there's a bigger picture here. I'm not sure. I know there's reports saying that it wasn't related to the Super League, and the results ultimately prove that. But I think the fact that it's come 6 days before Spurs' biggest game of their lifetime in a while, which would be the Carabao Cup final, a chance to win silverware for the first time since 2008. And I think, surely, I mean, it might have been, from my opinion, I think it would have been wiser to maybe give him the opportunity to win that trophy because, Jose has been in those positions in finals before and look how he's come out. And I just think the time of it is so weird, Paddy.
Yes, it is. And it can only be, I mean, no doubt, details of that will emerge depending on the subtext of the tearing up of the contract. That Jose may not be able to speak or something. It depends how much. He'd certainly be picking up upwards of 30 million if it's a straightforward sacking. But again, that remains to be seen. But it's it's small news really
Yeah.
on this day. We were speaking on Monday, and still reeling from the news about the decidedly unsuper Super League.
I mean, we haven't even talked about, the cup semi-final. I mean, how they
No,
both went.
well, it's somebody said this morning on Twitter, and how right they were, that this is more than a cup final now,
Yeah, yeah,
because you have Leicester City, who are what you might the best English club, who are not part of this plan.
mm,
In other words, the club who on this season's form would be champions, would
yeah,
expect to be champions every year,
yeah,
on this season's form, um, playing against Chelsea, um, who are already prepared to say bye bye. We don't
yeah.
care about it, FA Cup final. So it's certainly adds an unwanted but genuine piquancy to the cup final, and I was just looking forward to a good game before, but
Mm.
now I'm going to buy a Leicester City scarf. I'm going to have a fox draped around my shoulders. So, I mean, it's I suppose it's added something to it.
Yeah, it's. I woke up this morning and it was just. I've never actually felt the feeling I felt this morning.
Mm,
That throughout the time I've invested my life into football,
mm,
and the time of me being a supporter, it's just complete sense of shock. It's almost like a family member or a friend like dying.
mm,
That sort of feeling, because it's just they're trying to take away such a big aspect of our
mm,
game, which is
mm.
the competitive edge, which makes our
Because
game so
I
special.
think that when you looked at I don't know if you do the same, and anybody watching feels or listening feels the same. When
Mm,
you look up at the VIP areas at, say, a Champions League final, and you see these fat cats and blatters and people like that,
yeah.
and you see them, but what Blatter was and what Platini was, and I know they did a couple of naughty things. I know that they were football lovers.
Mm,
I promise you they were. They
mm,
really were football lovers. And they have been usurped by people who are not football lovers.
no.
The people who have done this, Glazers,
FSG.
Fenway Sports
Yeah.
Group, and the people who run Inter and Milan, and how the fans of those two great clubs,
Mm,
Juventus.
mm,
What must the late great Agnelli be thinking about
mm.
what is it his grandson?
What must
Who's
Busby be thinking? What must Bill Shankly be thinking?
what must, but not just Busby, what must Ferguson, Sir Alex
Ferguson, yeah.
Ferguson, be thinking? He must feel the same sense of betrayal, I would guess, as we do, and yet he knows that he was the biggest supporter of the Glazers when they bought into Manchester United. Look, what a sense of betrayal he must feel now, as they, complete non-football fans, design the future, deign,
Mm.
purport to redesign the future of our game, your game, and Sir Alex Ferguson's game. Oh,
Liverpool, 6 Champions League titles.
mm.
Manchester United, famous treble-winning season in
What are they going to do? They're going to
1999.
throw the trophies away
That could
when
all
it's
mean
when a new trophy.
absolutely, yeah, that could mean absolutely nothing in about 3 or 4 years' time, because
Yeah.
of these new proposals. And it's taken away club history, it's taken away fan history, it's taken
Mm,
away history at on a British scale, I think,
mm,
because these clubs have. I mean, Sir Alex came out last night and he was saying there was no better feeling than getting to a Champions League final.
mm.
No better feeling. No better feeling competing in a Champions League
Well,
final.
I think
But
he even enjoyed losing that one to
yeah, it's
Guardiola's
Barcelona. Yeah,
Barcelona, because it was such a
such a good
wonderful
team.
game.
Yeah, I know.
I remember being astonished that he was sort of smiling, realizing that his United had done the best, but been beaten by a wonderful team and a great player
Mm.
in Messi. Uh, what must they be thinking exactly, Omar? But
I mean,
anyway,
Yeah.
Sorry, you were going to say something?
I mean, yeah, I think as a supporter, I'd fully advocate for, in a safe possible way, once restrictions, have
Mm.
opened up, some form of protest and, against these
Yes,
people, because
it has to be done.
it has to be done.
As with all causes, it has to be done in a safe and responsible way,
Yeah.
in order not to damage the cause. But yes, I'm up for that.
Yeah.
Whenever you like, Omar, you and I march down the Mall or something, and that'll shake them, won't it?
With our banners up,
That'll make a big difference. So anyway, it's probably best that we now go back to our interview, which was conducted last week with the football writer of the year, Sam Wallace.
Right. Hello, Sam. Thank you for coming on The Perspective. Really appreciate it. First of all, well, how are you?
I'm good, Omar. Nice to make your acquaintance. And I'm guessing that this is the fourth episode. So how's it going so far?
Yeah, it's been going. It's quite refreshing actually, because there was the Sunday Supplement, which was like a platform for like all the journalists to kind of congregate from all their different media organizations. And it was just well, for me personally, it was just a really nice platform, and it's quite refreshing to just see people from different companies kind of debating about all the topical events in football and stuff. And I don't think there has been that sort of platform since it did cease to exist. So I think there was always an appetite there for something similar to be reintroduced into the football journalism world, from speaking to like the journalists we have been speaking to. So yeah, it's been going good. I think I haven't bored Paddy yet to death.
Not at all. No, not at all. Anything but some great people that I think are great football brains. But of course, we've got the best. And you don't have to, it's not a matter of opinion. It's actually a fact. The football journalist of the year is Sam Wallace. So congratulations, Sam, on winning the Sports Journalists Association Award. Not only that, you won the double. Unlike Man City, there's going to be no treble or nothing more than a double, but you won the double, also Scoop of the Year, quite rightly, for Project Big Picture, which we would like to discuss in a few minutes. But first of all, we'd like to talk about the Champions League. What did you think about the semi-finalists, and could we have an all-English final?
I think if you had to call those semi-finals, I think that's a distinct possibility. I mean, it feels very different to have Bayern out already. They've been sort of such staples for the last couple of years, and I think in the end, I thought really injuries did for them in the end. I thought that they could have, I thought they had every chance of getting through. I suppose the interesting part of it is you have two teams in that semi-final, although they're playing each other who have never won it before.
Yeah.
And that makes it quite interesting. They are, PSG and City are the two new powers, aren't they, of world football? They are the fossil fuel fortune clubs who have disrupted the sport. I mean, you had Chelsea as well in the other semi-finals, but in terms of the spending of the last 8 years, these are the sort of preeminent sides. So I'd say one with the most famous manager in the world, and one with the most expensive footballer in history. So I think that's kind of intriguing. I think Manchester City have been much more kind of strategic with the fortune at their disposal. I think they have built a much more efficient football club, and indeed football network of football clubs. Whereas PSG, you always feel it's been a bit more of a traditional approach to success, where it's been, let's sack the manager and get another one in, let's sack the manager and get another one in. So I think that although Real Madrid and Chelsea is obviously fascinating, I think PSG City feels like this sort of epic battle between the two new powers, and for whom winning the Champions League will be the sort of like the completion of the first stage, won't it, of their plans for world dominance or whatever it is they've got in mind.
Liverpool seemed to actually throw away a chance of yet another great comeback, with poor finishing. Right from the start of the game, actually, and kind of snatching at chances. Well, I thought Real Madrid played with spirit, but did you see an awful lot else to frighten Chelsea?
No, I know what you mean. I mean, they're obviously not the Madrid of sort of 5 years ago. I mean, from Liverpool's perspective, I just think it's sorry about the intervention. That's the that's the dog who wants to make a point about Liverpool. So
not a Man United fan.
But yeah, I think Liverpool, it was with the kind of defensive the injuries that they've had at the back. I think that changes the whole structure of the team, and I think that makes a huge difference really to the way they play and the confidence that they have. And I think that really changes the dynamic of the team.
Sam, I really want to talk to you more about the development of Madrid, because as you said, that they're not the side they once were. But what I was really impressed with was over the two legs against Liverpool was the actual defensive performances that excluded both Rafael Varane and Sergio Ramos. And I think it was Eder Militao and Nacho. And they put in brilliant defensive performances. Do you think we're moving towards that stage now where Madrid will have to see the likes of Ramos go and Varane go, and we're kind of seeing like this new development in their backbone of like their defense?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an important point that in a season where some clubs have been, in Liverpool in particular, have been sort of ravaged by injuries, you're only as good as your sort of second choice centre half pairing, and they, you're right, they were excellent. I mean, I've written a lot about Madrid in the past and their financial situation. I'm intrigued to see where they go. I mean, the two big Spanish clubs, if you look at the evidence of their financial results, they are so heavily indebted, both of them over €1 billion. That I from a logical point of view, I fail to see how they make a big move in the market. I know they have got saleable assets and they have got players they could sell. Arguably even in the quite depressed market, but the fact that I don't think Modric's deal is agreed yet, is it, for next season? I think it is expected that he will stay for another year. But the fact that Ramos hasn't got a new deal, that there seems to be quite a lot of noise around Varane leaving. I don't think those are necessarily bad developments. I just wonder what kind of, every team has to be regenerated. I just wonder what sort of resources they've got to replace those players. And when you think really Hazard was their last really big kind of signing that they took out of the Premier League, and that was right at the limit of their resources, and it clearly has not worked out for either party. You do wonder what the next stage will be like for them.
Yeah, I mean, you touched upon big acquisitions. There's loads of talk. I think surprising talk really about, big money moves. Let's talk about Kylian Mbappe, Erling Haaland. And yeah, as I said, it surprises me because, there's a lot of constraints within the football market, the transfer market. I think that's because of the pandemic. And Mino Raiola, he's been touting Haaland to Madrid, to Barcelona, and he's probably going to be touting to the English clubs. And we saw Haaland against City. He didn't score any goals, but do you see many big money moves happening in the transfer market this summer?
I don't. I mean, I have to say that. You can always, you always be surprised. But I mean, the feeling seems to be that it'll be a lot like it was last summer. There might be one club, as Chelsea did last summer, who spend a lot of money, but at the moment yeah, I wonder. I do wonder about Haaland. I mean, clearly he's got a buyout clause that doesn't come into effect this summer, and whether his latest sort of kind of tour of European clubs was a prelude to a move in 2022. I think often the market is driven by the two big Spanish clubs, and again, I just don't see how they. I don't see what they use to pay for these players. You know, they have indebted themselves to such an extent, including government loans over, you know, COVID loans, that for that to be able to buy a player without a heavily kind of with it being sort of scheduled payments and over the course of the contract, I just don't quite see how they do that. But I mean, I think the Spanish press who are eternally optimistic about these things and said that they're going to sign. I mean, I've seen a front page of them saying that Madrid are going to sign Mbappe and Haaland, which is incredible. And you know,
they're probably right. Yeah,
this may come back to haunt me, but I mean, I don't have any insider knowledge. All I go on are the financial results that they release, and they are absolutely dire. I mean, Barcelona and Real Madrid both pay their players twice a year, so you get 6 months money in January and in, I think it's the 1st of July, and they, you know, Barcelona were struggling to meet that obligation in January. So again, I know this is a kind of narrative that sort of, it's almost like it's woven into the way we talk about football. Whenever a player emerges, everyone talks about, well, could he be good enough for Barcelona? Could he be good enough for Real Madrid? And it's kind of an addiction that I think we have as football media and as also fans. Yeah. But I'm just not sure that that's plausible anymore. But, you know, I could be surprised.
What about Jude Bellingham? Because, you know, the talk before this the second leg of the quarterfinal was all Haaland this, Haaland that, and Bellingham emerged the star. Have you seen quite a bit of him on your England travels?
No, I mean, I was there for the San Marino game, which he came on in. I've seen clips of him. I mean, he's been a name for years. I mean, he's been very much. He was very loyal to Birmingham, really. I mean, he earned them a lot of money, and he could have gone to any club as a scholar. Before that, I mean, he literally could have had his pick, and he chose not to. I think that was a really interesting decision. Obviously, he ended up playing a lot of Championship games. I think he only played 40-odd games for them. I mean, they say only, he's still 17, and now he's a Champions League. You know, he's playing in the quarterfinals of the Champions League. So I think he's a really good example of a well-planned career. I think these boys and their families come under extraordinary pressure to move when they are, you know, they've not even done their GCSEs, and you know, I have. We get to the stage now where I've got friends whose children are entering that system, that academy system, and I think he's a brilliant example of it. If you can play for your local club where you've been and where you're not going to have to do your homework in the car because it's a 2-hour drive and it doesn't completely disrupt family life. If you feel that no matter how promising you're told your child is, that there's first team football at the end of it, it really does benefit a child, I think, from staying in their local club's academy, and it certainly proved that way with Bellingham.
Now there's a question that I'm sorry Omar, because I know you've got one, but this is a really serious question that I want to ask Sam, and I hope he'll be able to give an honest answer to it. As a, you know, you're now a highly decorated football writer, but is being a football writer better than being a ball boy?
This is you're talking about a game where you would have been in the press box, and
exactly. I was the football correspondent of the Independent when you were a ball boy at, was it England Brazil?
It was England Brazil in 1990. Wow. I can't claim that it was anything to do with my football ability that got me there. It was because now that's a job that is often given to the academy boys. As you see, like Hudson Odoi and Phil Foden, and both there's great pictures of them as ball boys. It was just my Sunday league team in Stevenage, which is my hometown, got picked in a lottery. I mean, and then I was picked. We all put our names into a hat, and I think about 10 of us ended up going. And your report that night was much better than my performance, Paddy, because I never even touched the ball.
I was just going to say, Sam, and I'm sorry to say this, but I've got to be honest with you. I always keep an eye on the ball boys, but you didn't stand out at all. I don't even remember you.
I was, because it was the old Wembley, and we were still coming out of quite a brutal era for stadiums. The problem was that wherever I stood, I was in someone's sightline. So I was barracked for the whole game. I mean, short of lying down behind the advertising hoardings, I don't think I would have pleased anyone. But it was memorable, that game, for the fact that the Brazilians were denied an absolute blatant penalty. I don't know if you remember, Stuart Pearce handball on the line.
Oh, really?
And we were told that there was going to be a presentation on the pitch afterwards, which everyone was looking forward to. Of course, the Brazilians just walked straight off. They felt pretty robbed. So the England players didn't really know what to do. I think it was 1-0. I think Lineker scored.
Lineker,
yeah. And so the English players just sort of milled around, kind of looking at the departing Brazilians. And the only people who remembered to line up in the centre spot were the ball boys. So for a while, in a sort of rapidly emptying old Wembley, we were stood in the middle of the pitch, looking out. It was a surreal experience. But I remember I picked up a bit of the turf, which had been dislodged, and I put it in my pocket, and I took it home and watered it every day. And I had this little bit of sprouting Wembley turf on my bookshelf. And then my football team had a little tour. I said to my younger brother, "Don't forget to water the Wembley turf. I'll be back in a week." And I got back, and it was just dust.
Oh no!
Completely forgotten. But yeah, that's my Wembley story.
Oh, brilliant! Absolutely.
The FA didn't even let us keep the tracksuits. Can you believe that? That's how parsimonious they were.
Oh no! And you didn't get to swap shirts with Bebeto or
no, Careca was the big star.
Careca,
yeah. I know, actually, Bebeto would have been about that era as well.
Yeah, I think I looked up the teams. I honestly can't remember the game, which is shameful. But unlike you, I never got to take a sod of turf home. Anyway, Sam, you won the award because of project. This. Well, you may have won it anyway, but what enhanced it was Scoop of the Year about Project Big Picture. Are you reasonably optimistic that the big picture will be looked at in the future, and that football will come out of this with good values?
I'm not really, Paddy. I have to say, I'm very pessimistic. I know that this podcast is broadcast is the wrong word. Is uploaded to the internet or released, let's say, on Monday, which final decision about the future of club competitions post 2024. And I think that was all interconnected with big picture. I think that the fact that they wanted to reduce the size of the Premier League meant that they had more match days to play with in order to compete in Europe. And I'm not actually sure what's going to happen really next week. I presume it's going to get passed because it is the will of the big clubs, and they seem to be that particular tail seems to be wagging the dog at the moment. So I feel quite worried actually about the future of football. I feel worried about the expansion of the Champions League and what that might do to domestic revenues, not just the Premier Leagues, but all over Europe. And I think at the heart of it, my concern is just inequality. I just worry about the scope for teams to come all the way up the pyramid and to challenge and to have that dream of getting into the Champions League or whatever iteration of it evolves. And I often, I mean, Paddy, you'll know much more about this than me, but I love looking back at the runs of clubs from when I was a child or when I was a teenager to get to European finals and just see. I mean, I was looking at Manchester United's from to the 91 European Cup Winners' Cup, which you would have definitely have covered.
I covered.
So everyone remembers the final in Rotterdam. And Mark Hughes' brilliant goal and the Barcelona team that they beat that then went on to win the European Cup. But I'd forgotten the teams. They played Wrexham on the way to that. They played Peshki Munkas in Hungary. They played Legia Warsaw. They played Montpellier. And you might say, well, that's a bit of an easy run, but those were the cup winners. They were the teams that had won the cup in Europe, and you really could win 4 games and 4 ties and find yourself in a final. We're never going to go back to that. But what was so thrilling about that as a fan was that it was knockout football before Christmas. So your jeopardy was high. You know, you were obviously maybe not against Wrexham, with all respect, but there was still the potential for that. And I don't know, what was it like covering those tournament games where literally you'd be with United or you'd be with Liverpool, and they could conceivably go out in the first round.
Yeah, it was wonderful. But I mean, so many clubs have European history who, you know, and there won't be others. Yes, Portsmouth a few years ago, but even that's tinged with a few questions. But you know, I support Dundee, always have done, and we reached the semi-final of what would now be called the Champions League.
Incredible.
You know, and you know, arguably we should have been the first British club. Nottingham Forest, I mean, on a much higher level, actually won the damn thing twice. You know, while you know, I think after the semi-final, Forest against Cologne, I think they came back and the next league crowd was 15,000, and you know, that kind of thing isn't going to happen. I mean, maybe Jose's achievements with Porto are the last time that's going to happen, even to a big club. I think of Porto as a big club because there were big clubs, because you know, I watched them win the Champions League long before Jose came along in can't remember the year, but
that's a good question. I think it's 87. But I could be wrong.
I think they beat Bayern in the final, and Magyar scored a cheeky winning goal. So I mean, loads of clubs all over Europe have a great European history, and if it's going to be just a little sort of like the NFL or something, just that maybe 12 clubs can have a future in Europe, I think it'll be. I absolutely understand why you, Sam, and other perceptive journalists have tried to blow the whistle on this, but equally I understand why you're not optimistic that right will prevail. I'm quite conscious that we're taking up too much of your time, so I want to push on to the near future, which is perhaps a little less gloomy, and the European Championship, Euro 2020. I know it sounds like last summer, but it is the future. Omar, can you, you've got a couple of questions that you want to ask Sam about this.
Yeah, so, I mean, the first question I want to ask you is, who do you think your favourites are for the Euros? Because mine personally, I think Portugal have a really good chance, because I think, you know, Ruben Diaz, for me, he's player of the season. I think he's been sensational at Manchester City. I think he's the main catalyst for why they are on course to winning the title this season. And then they've also got João Felix, Ronaldo, Bruno Fernandes as well. He's had a stellar season. But who are your favourites?
Yeah, I'm in Portugal. I think they're hard to overlook. France, obviously they're the world champions. I felt when they won the World Cup, France, they had such a brilliant team, and they, for me, they were man for man from the start of the tournament. You really felt this is the team to beat. I didn't think they did it in a particularly thrilling style. I thought it was safety first, and the final was pretty forgettable. I mean, it really was. Yeah. I felt like they could have been like one of the greats in terms of their style, but they chose not to. I know what you mean with Portugal, just because they've done it before, and they just have that. They just seem to be very good in tournaments. They just seem to respond. So I wouldn't disagree with Portugal. I'd probably put them It's hard with France. It's hard to split those two. I think. Yeah, I'll go with Portugal. I think. I know the bookies have got England favourite, but I presume that's just because so many English fans. I think there will be very few better opportunities in this. I mean, I don't know what you think, Paddy, compared to the boys that you covered in 1990.
Well, do you mean about England?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love the way Southgate's gone about the job. I love the youth and freshness that there always seems to be around the teams. The way the way he sets up his teams, the attempts at tactical flexibility. I sometimes think that England are a wee bit like Chelsea, 11 players all exactly the same. But you could say the same about Man City, in terms of the way they're organized to be totally interchangeable. So, yeah, I wouldn't rule England out at all. But since you ask, Sam, I'm not saying this country will win it, but 28-1 is available against Denmark. And this is Denmark. Listen to their spine. Schmeichel, in my opinion, one of the best characters in a goalkeeping shirt anywhere in the world.
Leader, yeah.
A leader, a proper leader. Continuing on the spine, the middle of the defense has players like Kjær, Vestergaard, and Anderson from the English Premier League. Both, in my opinion, I'm Fulham fan, and in England, and Anderson is a sensational addition to the Premier League. Central midfield, you've got people like Højbjerg and Christian Eriksen. I mean, these are just the ones we know. The two, I haven't seen much of the two lads at Brentford, the midfield players, but they're both people who know about football have told me they're both really good players. There are some young strikers, again, whose names escape me, but who are going crazy in the World Cup qualifiers at the moment. And that's just the spine running up the middle of the team, and class. And it reminds me very much of the 1992 when they won it with another bloke called Schmeichel playing in goal. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if they won it. It wouldn't surprise me at all if they lost their first knockout game. I think they'll come out of their group. But then the other factor, quite apart from history, is that they, like England, are a host nation. Not in the later stages, but early on when you have to get out of the group, which is a good factor. So that's my left field prediction.
Denmark. No, I like that. I think Wales are another good chance.
Wales, definitely Wales.
Yeah. They look like a really and sometimes what's happened obviously with Ryan Giggs and that being unresolved can sometimes bring a side together, and there just seems to be a lot of good young Welsh players coming through like Joe Rodon and Ben Cabango,
Daniel James,
Daniel James, just seems to be a little like a real kind of they seem to take a real pleasure in playing for their country as well, and they I don't know. I mean, Ramsey's missed a lot of games recently with injury. I don't know whether he'll be around, but clearly Ramsey and Bale are two top talents.
Another thing, I wanted to bring it back a bit to England. Paddy, you were saying you love what Southgate's doing with the youth and stuff, but the one big question mark I have over England is the defence still. I don't think this is just a guessing game, but I presume that Southgate's probably going to go with John Stones and Harry Maguire as his two natural centre-back pairing. And John Stones has had a brilliant season, don't get me wrong, but I still think there's a mistake in him, as we saw against Poland. And I think, that's the main concern I have over England. I think they have so much attack and prowess. I mean, they've got so many number 10s. They've got Mason Mount, Jack Grealish, Phil Foden, but
James
Maddison. But I think it's so hard to get all these players embedded into one system. And I think even with England as well, with the fullbacks, I don't think there's as much of a emphasis on the attacking side of things, as we've seen with the Trent Alexander-Arnold debate. I think, well, I think Southgate picked Kieran Trippier over Southgate in the recent squad, and I think that is also an influential factor as well. I mean, Luke Shaw, he's had a good season. Ben Chilwell, he's had an okay season, but I mean, yeah, it's just the defense for me, really, for England. That concerns me.
Yeah, I think it's. I think I'd probably be right in saying he's not really got a naturally left-sided defender. Well, that's probably why Tyrone Mings gets in the squad, but
yeah,
I don't think he'll start. I presume after the last friendlies that Southgate now is sort of wedded to 4 at the back, rather than 3. Maybe that changes. I think yes, you're right about the centre halves. He's maybe not got as much choice as he would want, but he has still got the two first choice centre halves from the 2 top teams in as the league table is at the moment.
Yeah.
In Maguire and Stones. I think the goalkeeper is probably a little bit of a problem. I think he'll stick with Pickford because he feels that he's got his distribution is very important. On the Alexander-Arnold debate, I mean, obviously a fine player, hasn't played well for England. No. He just hasn't. So when you're making a really difficult decision like that, I think that has to come into your thinking. And the notion that I've heard from some people of playing in midfield, I just think is ridiculous. I mean, that's the mistake that many England managers have made over the years of trying to play players out of their position that they played all season. For all the kind of sort of hand-wringing over Alexander-Arnold, compared to 8 or 9 years ago, or like 2010, for instance, which is a bit further back, when really anyone who basically played in the Premier League and was English got in the squad. I mean, to me, it's such a positive development. I mean, whenever I used to look at other, not a positive development, obviously for Trent Alexander-Arnold, but the fact that you are in a position where you can make an argument for leaving out, really talented players. That to me is although it's on a micro level, it's probably a very contentious debate. Or the bigger picture of that is very, very positive, I think. I always used to look at other countries and think, how does Mikel Arteta not have a cap to Spain? You know what I mean? Even going further back, how does Uwe Rosler not play for Germany? And yet they didn't, and because they were good, but they just weren't good enough. And to me, that's the sign of a strong nation when you start to leave out players. And I'm not talking about leaving out Paul Scholes in the era where he blatantly should have been a starter for England. But I think you can make a cogent debate for Alexander-Arnold being left out. Not everyone's going to agree, far from it. But that to me is much more positive. I remember, Paddy, you would have been at those games, looking at Champions League team sheets 7 or 8 years ago, and just as I was waiting for the game to start, just writing their nationalities by their names. And it was heartbreaking sometimes, even with English, as an Englishman, maybe less so for a Scotsman, but for anyone who cares about the English game or the British game indeed, just thinking there's more Argentinians in this game than there are English players. Or there's more Chileans in this game than there are English players.
Absolutely. But even so, Sam, I know you're an England man, but for a man called Wallace, not to mention Scotland among the favourites for Euro 2020 is appalling. But we are still very, very grateful. You're quite right, by the way. We have no chance. But we are very, very grateful for your company. Thank you very much, Sam, for being a guest on The Perspective.
Thank you, Sam.
And all the very best for the rest of your award-winning season.
Thanks. It was a pleasure. Really nice to do it.
Thanks, Sam.
Okay.
Really appreciate it.
We're done.
Okay.